The grand chamber of the Cathar Ascendancy was a cavern of living crystal, its facets shimmering with the captured light of 1,000 dying stars. Each pulse of luminescence reflected the agitated states of the delegates assembled, their biochromatic hides shifting through hues of anxious violet and deep, simmering crimson. They were the architects of an empire that spanned a significant arm of the galaxy, a coalition of species bound by ancient treaties and a shared, instinctual fear of the unknown. Today, that fear had a name: humanity. The name was a whisper, a dissonant chord in the symphony of galactic politics, yet it resonated with the chilling finality of a death knell. At the heart of the chamber, suspended in a column of gravitic energy, floated the High Chancellor, Xylos, his form a cascade of liquid silver, his thoughts rippling through the collective consciousness of the assembly. He had held this council for cycles, and for cycles, the debate had circled the same drain of uncertainty, pulling them all into a vortex of indecision. "They do not respond as the archives predict," Delegate Vorlag of the obsidian-shelled Grawl stated, his voice a low grinding of stone on stone. His species were warriors, thinkers of strategy and force. They saw the universe as a series of threats to be neutralized, and humanity was the most perplexing threat they had ever encountered. Their expansion is passive. They arrive in systems, they observe, they catalog, and they depart. Their vessels are primitive, shielded by energies we mastered millennia ago. They carry rudimentary kinetic weapons, barely a threat to a commercial freighter, let alone a vessel of the line. And yet, they advance unchecked. A murmur of agreement and dissent washed through the chamber. The Grawl were respected for their directness, but their conclusions were often seen as lacking nuance. Humanity's passivity was the very core of the problem. It was a silence that screamed. The galaxy was a tumultuous place, a constant struggle for resources, territory, and ideological dominance. Empires rose and fell on the strength of their fleets and the ruthlessness of their leaders. A species that expanded without conquest was an anomaly, a variable that could not be accounted for in the grand, brutal equation of existence. "Passive, you say, Vorlag," countered a lilting, ethereal voice. It belonged to Ambassador Lyra of the Signian Vale, a being of pure energy contained within a crystalline shell, her form a swirling nebula of blues and purples. Or is it a new form of aggression, a psychological warfare we are too solid to comprehend? They seed our databases with their art, their music, their philosophies. These stories, they are filled with contradictions, tales of immense cruelty and boundless compassion. They glorify sacrifice and yet cling to individual life with a ferocity that is illogical. They are a paradox, a walking contradiction that destabilizes our understanding of life itself. Lyra's point resonated more deeply with the assembled minds. The Grawl saw a lack of ships, Lyra saw an invasion of thought. The human cultural packets, as their analysts had termed them, were indeed a source of profound unease. They were not propaganda in the traditional sense. They did not call for conversion or submission. They simply were. A vast, chaotic library of a species' soul, offered freely to any who would listen. The Ascendancy's psychologists had spent sleepless cycles attempting to build a cohesive psychological profile of humanity from these transmissions, and they had failed spectacularly. The data was too varied, too self-contradictory. For every symphony of sublime beauty, there was a historical record of unimaginable horror. For every philosophical treatise on universal love, there was a schematic for a weapon capable of cracking a planet's crust. High Chancellor Xylos allowed the debate to flow, his silvery form undulating with the currents of thought. He had reviewed the reports himself. The human ships were, by all ascendancy metrics, pathetically weak. Their energy signatures were faint, their drives inefficient, their hulls composed of alloys that would buckle under the focused fire of a standard patrol cutter. The Ascendancy could, if it so chose, erase the human presence from this galactic sector in a single, decisive campaign. The Grawl had advocated for this very action on numerous occasions. A preemptive strike, they called it, a necessary culling of a potential threat before it could fester. But Xylos was old, far older than most beings in the chamber, and he had learned that the most dangerous threats were not always the ones with the largest fleets. The silence from humanity was a strategic variable he could not quantify. Why broadcast their cultural and technological archives for all to see? Was it arrogance, naivete, or was it a trap, a way of lulling the galaxy into a false sense of security before revealing their true? In nature, the Ascendancy's intelligence services had tried to infiltrate human space, to glean some secret that would unravel the mystery. Their probes, their spies, their long-range sensor arrays, they all returned the same maddeningly consistent information. Humanity was a young species, barely interstellar, technologically adolescent, and seemingly unaware of the ancient, predatory nature of the cosmos. Their weakness may be a deception, Xylos finally projected, his thoughts cutting through the chamber's simmering debate with the cold precision of a surgical laser. The assembled delegates fell silent, their attention fixed on the shimmering form of their leader. We have analyzed their vessel designs, their power outputs, their tactical doctrines. They are by every measure inferior, but we have also analyzed their history. It is a history of conflict, of overcoming impossible odds, of a relentless, almost insane drive to survive and expand. They have fought wars against themselves that would have shattered other civilizations. They have endured self-inflicted ecological catastrophes that would have rendered a dozen worlds uninhabitable, and each time they have emerged stronger, more adaptable. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle into the collective consciousness. We assume they think as we do. That power is measured in fleet strength and territorial control. But what if their concept of power is different? What if their strength lies not in their ships, but in their resilience, their unpredictability? To strike them now without understanding their true nature would be to roll the dice with the fate of the ascendancy. And I, for one, am not a gambler. The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken fears. Xylos had articulated the core of their paralysis. It was not the strength of humanity they feared, but their own ignorance. They were an ancient civilization, a galactic superpower, and they were being held in check by a species of primitives who had only just learned to walk among the stars. The humiliation of it was as palpable as the threat. It was into this atmosphere of tense, fearful inaction that the new report arrived. A ripple of subspace distortion, a priority alert that bypassed all protocols and manifested as a crimson sigil in the heart of the chamber. The sigil of a first contact scenario. The delegates stirred, their biochromatic hides flashing with alarm. First contact protocols were sacred, rigid, designed to prevent the very kind of uncertainty they were now facing with humanity. A sensor technician's voice, filtered through the chamber's acoustic dampeners, echoed with a tremor of disbelief. High Chancellor, we have an unscheduled arrival. A single vessel of human origin. It has entered the Tharos system. It is on a direct course for the diplomatic outpost on Tharos Prime. The Tharos system was not just any system. It was a nexus, a crossroads of ascendancy trade and a vital military staging ground. Its proximity to several client species' homeworlds made it one of the most heavily defended sectors in the Empire. For a lone, primitive human ship to enter it was not just a breach of protocol, it was an act of suicide. Is it a warship? Vorlag boomed, his warrior instincts flaring. Negative, delegate, the technician replied, his voice strained. The vessel's energy signature is negligible. It corresponds to their smallest known class of vessel. A long-range survey ship. Its weapon systems are it has none. No kinetic cannons, no energy projectors. Its shielding is barely sufficient to handle micrometeoroid impacts. By our standards, it is unarmed. A civilian vessel. The chamber descended into a stunned silence. A single, unarmed, civilian human ship had just trespassed into one of their most fortified systems. The sheer, unadulterated audacity of it was breathtaking. It was a move so illogical, so contrary to every known principle of galactic strategy that it bordered on the insane. Was it a mistake, a navigational error, or was it a message? Xylos's silvery form contracted, a sign of deep concentration. What is the fleet's posture in the Tharos system? The 7th Sanctified Fleet is on station, High Chancellor. Admiral Kavorn is in command. He has surrounded the human vessel. His fleet outnumbers it by, well, it is a fleet against a single, small ship. He awaits your orders. The weight of the moment pressed down on Xylos. The entire galaxy, it seemed, was holding its breath. The Grawl faction was practically vibrating with a desire for action. The Cygnian Vale and other, more cautious species were radiating waves of apprehension. This was it, the moment of truth. The humans had made a move, a bizarre, inexplicable move, and the ascendancy had to respond. To destroy the ship would be to declare war on a species they did not understand, a war that could have unforeseen and catastrophic consequences. To let it proceed would be to show weakness, to invite further incursions, to signal to the rest of the galaxy that the Cathar ascendancy could be challenged with impunity. Open a channel to Admiral Kavorn, Xylos commanded, his thoughts a steely, unwavering projection. And patch a visual of the human vessel into this chamber. Let us all see this ghost that has haunted our councils for so long. The crystalline walls of the chamber shimmered, and a vast, three-dimensional image resolved in the center of the room. It showed the cold, stardusted blackness of space, dominated by the shapes of the Seventh Sanctified Fleet. They were magnificent vessels, paragons of Cathar engineering. Their hulls were crafted from polished, obsidian-like alloys, their forms a symphony of graceful, predatory curves and hard, functional angles. They bristled with weapon emplacements, their energy cores humming with a power that could sterilize a continent in moments. They were the embodiment of the Ascendancy's might, a silent testament to its dominance. And there, in the center of this ring of celestial predators, was the human ship. A collective gasp, a psychic exhalation of disbelief, swept through the chamber. It was pathetic, small, asymmetrical, and utterly unimpressive. Its hull was a dull, utilitarian gray, scarred and pitted from what must have been a long and arduous journey through the void. There were no elegant curves, no intimidating prows. It looked less like a starship and more like a piece of industrial equipment, something that had been cobbled together in a low-orbit shipyard with little regard for aesthetics. Its energy signature, displayed on the tactical overlay, was a pitiful flicker compared to the raging infernos of the Cathar warships. It was a fly caught in a web of dragons. Vorlag of the Grawl let out a low rumble of what could only be described as contemptuous laughter. That is the nightmare that has kept our strategists awake. That is the great mystery. It is a piece of cosmic debris. I have seen escape pods more well-equipped. High Chancellor, I implore you, give the order. Let us end this farce and be done with it. Xylos did not respond immediately. He was studying the image of the human ship, his ancient mind processing every detail. It was weak, yes. Unarmed, yes. But it was also calm. It floated in the void, held in the crushing embrace of a fleet that could annihilate it in a heartbeat, and it did not deviate from its course. It did not attempt to flee. It did not power up its feeble shields. It did not send any distress signals. It simply continued. A slow, steady, deliberate advance towards the diplomatic outpost on Theros Prime. Admiral K. Vorn, Xylos projected, his thoughts now broadcast across the fleet's command channel. Hail the human vessel, use the standard first contact protocols, demand their intention, but do not, under any circumstances, open fire unless I give the direct command. Is that understood? There was a pause, and then the gruff, subspace-filtered voice of the Admiral responded. Understood, High Chancellor, though I must protest. This is a mockery of our authority. Your protest is noted, Admiral, Xylos replied, his tone leaving no room for argument. Now proceed. The chamber watched, transfixed, as a communications laser lanced out from the Admiral's flagship, a tight beam of information aimed at the small, gray vessel. The standard Ascendancy greeting package, a complex stream of mathematical proofs, linguistic primers, and cultural overtures, would now be flooding the human ship systems. The expected response, according to protocol, would be a period of confusion, followed by a tentative, likely garbled attempt at communication. It might take days, even weeks, to establish a common language. The response came in less than a minute. It was not a garbled mess of data. It was not a confused query. It was a clear, concise, and perfectly translated message in the High Cathar dialect, a language so complex and nuanced that it took most species decades to master. The voice that spoke was calm, male, and devoid of any discernible emotion. This is Captain Eva Rostova of the human exploration vessel Wanderer. We have received your transmission. We are on a mission of peaceful exploration and have followed your designated approach vector for non-aligned vessels. Our destination is the Theros Prime diplomatic outpost. We mean you no harm. Please confirm you have received this message. Over. The chamber was silent. Not a single delegate moved. Not a single thought wave rippled through the collective. They had been debating the enigma of humanity for cycles, and in the space of a single minute the enigma had deepened 1,000-fold. The perfect, instantaneous translation was impossible. The calm, professional tone, the complete lack of fear or surprise, it was unnatural. It was as if a primitive, spear-wielding tribe had just been confronted by a technologically superior and had responded by calmly asking for directions in the Army's most obscure and formal dialect. Xylos felt a sensation he had not experienced in millennia, a cold, sharp prickle of genuine fear. The Grawl were wrong. The weakness of the ship was not a deception. It was a statement of confidence so profound, so absolute, that it transcended the need for warships and weapons. Admiral K. Vorn, Xylos commanded, his own thoughts now laced with an uncharacteristic urgency. Hold your position. Escort the human vessel to Theros Prime. Grant them diplomatic courtesy. I am coming to Theros Prime myself. This is no longer a military matter. It is something else." As the High Chancellor's personal vessel prepared to cleave a path through hyperspace, the image of the small, gray ship, the Wanderer, remained burned into the minds of every delegate in the chamber. It was still moving, a slow, insignificant speck surrounded by a fleet of gods. But it no longer looked weak. It looked patient. And in the cold, unforgiving calculus of the cosmos, patience was a weapon more terrifying than any fleet. The weakest human ship had just entered their space, and with it, it had brought a silence that was louder and more threatening than any declaration of war. The galaxy had just changed, and the members of the Cathar Ascendancy, for all their power and all their history, had no idea what was coming next. The silence from the Wanderer was not an absence of sound. It was the calm before a storm of unimaginable magnitude. The diplomatic outpost on Theros Prime was a marvel of Cathar engineering and a symbol of their philosophy of enlightened dominance. It was a city suspended in the upper atmosphere of the gas giant, a collection of shimmering silver spires and graceful, interconnected domes, all held aloft by a network of powerful gravitic emitters. It was a place of talk, of treaties, of the subtle, bloodless warfare of politics. It was not designed to receive visitors who arrived in vessels that were little more than tin cans, and it was certainly not prepared for the arrival of the High Chancellor himself on such short notice. Xylos materialized on the central reception platform, his liquid silver form coalescing from a shower of teleportation energy. He was met by a flustered retinue of diplomats and aides, their biochromatic hides flickering through a dozen shades of panic deference. He ignored them. His attention was fixed on the docking bay reserved for the human vessel. The Wanderer was there, dwarfed by the scale of the station, looking even more insignificant and out of place than it had in the void. It was docked, its external lights were on, but its ramp had not lowered. It was waiting. Admiral Cavorn was there to greet him, his massive, rock-like form radiating a barely suppressed fury. "High Chancellor, this is a grave mistake. We have them trapped. We should be dissecting their vessel, prying their secrets from their minds. Instead, we are rolling out the ceremonial welcome mat. They are mocking us." "Are they, Admiral?" Xylos projected, his thoughts cool and steady. "Or are we mocking ourselves with our own arrogance? They have not made a single hostile move. They have followed every protocol, every instruction. They have shown us nothing but peaceful intent. And yet you see only a target. Your eagerness to destroy what you do not understand is the true weakness, Cavorn, not the composition of their ship's hull." The Admiral stiffened, his pride wounded, but he did not argue further. He knew the Chancellor's word was law. They stood there, the leader of the Ascendancy and his most powerful military commander, waiting for the occupants of the weakest ship in the galaxy to emerge. The silence stretched, thick with tension. The entire station was holding its breath. What would they look like, these humans? The cultural archives had shown them to be a diverse species, but the images were often contradictory, ranging from beings of sublime grace to creatures of brutish appearance. Finally, a soft hiss echoed from the human ship. The ramp lowered slowly without ceremony. It came to rest on the polished deck of the docking bay. For a long moment, nothing happened. The empty doorway was a dark, inscrutable rectangle. Then a figure appeared. It was anticlimactic. It was a single human, dressed in a simple, form-fitting gray uniform that matched the ship's hull. The being was bipedal, bilaterally symmetrical, and of average height. It was not a fearsome warrior or a glowing entity of pure energy. It was just a person. The human had pale skin, dark hair cut short, and features that the Cathar translators rendered as female. Her expression was neutral, her posture relaxed but not casual. She walked down the ramp with a steady, unhurried gait, her eyes scanning the assembled Cathar delegation with a look of calm, dispassionate curiosity. This was Captain Eva Rostova. She stopped a few paces from the High Chancellor, her head tilting slightly as she took in his shimmering, non-corporeal form. There was no fear in her eyes, no awe, only a quiet, analytical focus. "High Chancellor Xylos," she said, her voice the same one they had heard over the comms, clear and perfectly modulated. The universal translator embedded in her uniform rendered the High Cathar dialect with flawless precision. "I am Captain Eva Rostova of the human exploration vessel Wanderer. I thank you for granting us safe passage and for agreeing to meet with me." Xylos pulsed with a soft, silver light. "Your arrival was unexpected, Captain Rostova. You have breached a restricted military zone. Your vessel is unarmed, your crew complement appears to be minimal. By all the laws of galactic protocol, your journey here should have been impossible. And yet, here you are. I confess, our models of prediction are inadequate to explain your actions. Rostova offered a small, almost imperceptible smile. It was not a smile of amusement, but of understanding. Our models of prediction suggested that a direct, honest approach was the most logical path to establishing communication. We have been observing your ascendancy for some time. We have studied your history, your culture, your politics. We understand that you are a cautious people, that you value strength and stability. We also understand that our unconventional nature has been a source of significant debate in your councils. The bluntness of her statement sent a shockwave through the assembled Cathar. She spoke as if she had been a silent observer in their most secret deliberations. The implication was staggering. Their most secure communications, the sanctity of their grand chamber, had it all been an open book to these newcomers. "You have been spying on us," Admiral Cavorn growled, taking a step forward. Rostova's gaze shifted to the massive Grawl warrior. Her calm demeanor did not falter. "We have been listening," she corrected, her tone gentle but firm. "There is a difference. Your communications are broadcast on frequencies that are, by our standards, quite public. We have not broken your codes. We have simply learned your language. We came to understand you, not to steal your secrets. We believe that understanding is the necessary prerequisite for any meaningful relationship." Xylos held up a shimmering, ethereal hand, silencing the admiral. "And what is it you seek, Captain Rostova? What is the purpose of this direct, honest approach? Why send a single, unarmed ship into the heart of our territory? What does humanity want from the Cathar ascendancy?" This was the question, the one that had fueled 1,000 debates, 1,000 sleepless nights. What was the endgame? What was the motive behind the paradox? Captain Rostova's gaze returned to Xylos, and for the first time a flicker of something deeper, something more profound, entered her eyes. It was not emotion in the way the Cathar understood it. It was a kind of gravity, a weight of knowledge. "We want to offer you a gift," she said simply. "A gift of knowledge. We have come to warn you." A confused murmur rippled through the delegation. A gift, a warning, from a species that still used chemical rockets to lift cargo into orbit. "Warn us of what?" Xylos pressed, his curiosity now a burning, focused point of light. "Of the true nature of the universe," Rostova replied. "You believe this galaxy to be a place of competing empires, a struggle for resources. This is a limited perspective, a nursery game played in the shallows of the cosmic ocean. There are older things in the void, deeper currents. We have found evidence of them, things that ended civilizations far older and more powerful than your ascendancy, things that are stirring once again." She paused, letting the silence hang in the air, a canvas for the terrifying image she was about to paint. "Your ascendancy, for all its power, is based on technologies that have fundamental limitations. Your energy sources, your faster-than-light travel, your communications, they all operate on principles that create ripples, subspace distortions, signatures. You are, if you will forgive the analogy, a very loud child in a very dark and ancient forest, and something has heard you." Admiral Cavorn let out a short, sharp bark of derisive laughter. "And I suppose your primitive ships are somehow immune to these older things? Your weakness is a shield. This is absurd. It is a trick, a pathetic attempt to intimidate us with ghost stories." Rostova did not look at the admiral. Her eyes remained fixed on Xylos. "It is not a trick, and our ships are not weak. They are quiet." She lifted her arm, and a small device on her wrist projected a holographic display into the air between them. It was a complex, rotating schematic of the Wanderer. "Your sensors are correct in their assessment of our vessel," she explained, her voice taking on the quality of a lecturer. "It has no weapons, its SH. Yields are for radiation and debris. Its power core is, by your standards, laughably inefficient, but you have made a fundamental error in your analysis. You have assumed that the purpose of our technology is the same as yours, the generation and projection of energy. You are mistaken. The purpose of our technology is the manipulation of reality itself." She manipulated the hologram, zooming in on the ship's core. It was not the familiar design of a fusion or antimatter reactor. It was a complex, geometric lattice of unknown materials, pulsing with a soft, internal light. "You travel through subspace," Rostova continued. "You tear a brute force hole in the fabric of spacetime and ride the shockwave. It is fast, but it is incredibly destructive on a quantum level. It leaves a scar, a wake that is visible across galaxies to those with the senses to see it. Our ships do not travel through space. They persuade it. They find the seams in reality, the quantum foam that underlies everything, and they gently step around the intervening distance. There is no subspace wake. No energy discharge. To a distant observer, our ships do not move at all. They simply cease to be in one location and begin to be in another. The assembled Cathar stared at the hologram, their minds reeling. The concept was so alien, so far beyond their understanding of physics that it was almost incomprehensible. It was not engineering, it was a form of cosmic magic. "And this is why you seem weak," Xylos said, his thoughts a whisper. "Your power is not in the output, but in the control, the subtlety." "Precisely," Rostova confirmed. "Loud ships are a liability. Powerful weapons create signatures that attract unwanted attention. We learned this lesson early in our history, and we learned it the hard way. We learned to be quiet, to be efficient, to be invisible. The Wanderer may seem like the weakest ship in your space, High Chancellor, but it is in fact the most advanced, because its greatest strength is that, to the true predators of the void, it does not appear to be here at all." The silence that followed was absolute. The weight of her revelation settled over them, crushing their preconceptions, shattering their paradigms of power. They had been measuring humanity with a yardstick, while the humans were using a calculus they couldn't even begin to comprehend. The small, gray ship in their docking bay was not a primitive vessel. It was a ghost, a whisper, a nightmare of technological superiority cloaked in the guise of utter weakness. Admiral K. Vorn, for the first time in his long and decorated career, was speechless. His entire worldview, his understanding of naval strategy and the very nature of power, had been rendered obsolete in the span of a few minutes. He looked at the human captain, at her calm, unassuming face, and he felt a primal fear that no enemy fleet had ever managed to inspire in him. You said you came to warn us," Xylos finally managed to project, his thoughts struggling to process the sheer scale of the paradigm shift. "What is this threat? What is it that you are so afraid of?" Captain Rostova's face, which had remained a mask of calm professionalism, now softened with a profound and ancient sadness. The look in her eyes was no longer just the gravity of knowledge, but the weariness of a sentinel who has stood a long and lonely watch. "We are not afraid of it," she said, her voice dropping to a near whisper, yet carrying an emotional weight that struck the Cathar to their very core. "We have been fighting it for 1,000 years." She gestured to the hologram of her ship again. "The Wanderer is not just an exploration vessel. That is a partial designation. Its full classification is exploration and sentry vessel. We are the cartographers of a graveyard. We are the watchmen on the walls of reality. We seek out young, promising civilizations like yours, civilizations that are growing too loud, too bright, and we try to warn them. We try to teach them how to be quiet, because we know what happens when they fail to learn." The grand reveal hung in the air, more devastating than any weapon's discharge. Humanity was not a race of naive newcomers. They were ancient, they were silent, and they were veterans of a cosmic war the rest of the galaxy did not even know existed. Their passivity was not a weakness. It was a discipline, honed over a millennium of hiding from an enemy that hunted by sound, by light, by the very signatures of life and civilization. "Show me," Xylos commanded, his voice a plea. "Show me this enemy." Captain Rostova nodded slowly. "I cannot show you them directly. To gaze upon them is to be unmade, but I can show you their work. I can show you what is coming." The hologram of the Wanderer dissolved, replaced by a star chart of a distant galaxy. It was a familiar spiral, one that Cathar astronomers had catalogued and studied for eons. Then, with a chilling, silent finality, a wave of nothingness began to sweep across it. It was not an explosion, it was not a fleet. It was a creeping, inexorable tide of absolute black. Stars winked out of existence, not in fiery novas, but as if they had simply been erased. Nebulae dissolved. Entire star clusters vanished. The light of 100 billion suns was being systematically extinguished, and the wave of annihilation was moving from that galaxy to the next, a cancer spreading through the cosmos. "We call them the static," Rostova said, her voice a somber eulogy for a galaxy she had never known. "Because that is all that is left behind, a dead silence, a universe devoid of information, of energy, of life. They are not conquerors. They do not seek resources or territory. They are a form of cosmic entropy, a force that seeks to return the universe to a state of perfect, ordered, lifeless silence. And they have noticed you." The Cathar delegation stared at the horrifying spectacle, at the death of a galaxy displayed in their docking bay. The bickering of their councils, the posturing of their fleets, the grand tapestry of their empire, it all seemed so small, so insignificant, so terrifyingly fragile in the face of this silent, all-consuming void. Their entire civilization was a candle flame flickering in a hurricane, and they had been so proud of their light, so oblivious to the storm. Why, Xylos whispered, the question not directed at Rostova but at the universe itself. Why help us? We were prepared to treat you as a threat. We contemplated your annihilation. Because that is what we do, Rostova replied, her gaze unwavering. We are human. Our own history is a litany of self-inflicted wounds, of foolish wars and needless destruction. We almost extinguished ourselves a dozen times over. But we learned. We learned that the only thing that can stand against the silent dark is a chorus of voices, that the only defense against entropy is life itself, in all its chaotic, contradictory, beautiful forms. We do not want you to be quiet because we fear you. We want you to learn to be quiet so that you can stand with us when the silence comes. The hologram faded, leaving the docking bay once again bathed in the soft, ambient light of the station. But the afterimage of the dying galaxy was burned into their retinas, into their minds. Captain Eva Rostova, the commander of the weakest human ship, stood before them not as a representative of a primitive species, but as an ambassador from a future they had never known was possible. She was offering them not a treaty of trade or a pact of non-aggression, but a chance at survival. Admiral K. Vorn, the great warrior, slowly, deliberately, lowered his massive head in a gesture of profound respect, a gesture his species reserved for those who had proven themselves to be true masters of the art of war. But this was a war beyond his comprehension, and this human, this calm, quiet woman was a grandmaster. Xylos' silvery form flowed forward, enveloping the human captain in a soft, shimmering light. It was a gesture of ultimate acceptance of unity. Your gift is overwhelming, Captain Rostova. We have been arrogant. We have been blind. You have given us the one thing our ascendancy has lacked for 10,000 years, a true purpose. Not to rule, but to survive. Not to command, but to protect. We will learn to be quiet. We will stand with you. Rostova nodded, a single, solemn gesture of acknowledgement. The first step had been taken. The alliance was forged, not in the fires of war, but in the cold, shared terror of a cosmic truth. The Cathar ascendancy, for all its might, was now a student, and humanity, the quiet paradox, was its teacher. As the formal discussions began, as the Cathar scientists and engineers were invited aboard the Wanderer to begin the slow, arduous process of unlearning 1,000 years of technological dogma, a deeper, more unsettling thought began to form in Xylos' ancient mind. The static was a terrifying, almost incomprehensible threat, a force that consumed galaxies, but humanity had been fighting it for a millennium. A species that could survive a war of that scale, for that long against an enemy of that magnitude, what had they become? He watched Captain Rostova as she interfaced with his chief scientists, her explanations of quantum mechanics and reality manipulation both elegant and terrifyingly simple. He saw the quiet efficiency of her minimal crew, no more than a dozen individuals, who moved with a shared purpose that transcended verbal communication. They were more than a crew. They were an organism, a single, focused will dedicated to an impossible task. And then the final, chilling piece of the puzzle fell into place. Rostova had shown them the static consuming a distant galaxy. She had shown them the evidence of its approach. She had told them that humanity had been fighting it, but she had never explained how. Later, in the privacy of his own meditation chamber Abo, Ard the diplomatic station, Xylos initiated a private channel to the human captain. He needed to know. He needed to understand the true nature of the beings with whom he had just allied his entire civilization. Captain Rostova, he projected, his thought voice somber. I must ask you one final question. It is a question that now troubles me more than the static itself. You say you have been fighting this cosmic entropy for 1,000 years. But a force that can erase galaxies cannot be fought with ships, no matter how advanced. It cannot be stopped with weapons, no matter how powerful. A tide cannot be fought. It can only be weathered or diverted. So I ask you, Captain, how has humanity survived? How have you fought this war? There was a long pause on the other end of the channel. Xylos could feel the weight of the unspoken answer, the gravity of a truth held in reserve. When Rostova's voice finally came, it was stripped of its diplomatic calm, of its lecturer's precision. It was raw, weary, and filled with the chilling echo of an impossible choice. You are correct, High Chancellor, she said, her voice barely a whisper. You cannot fight entropy with energy. You cannot stop the silence with noise. We learned that eons ago. We do not fight the static with our ships or our weapons. Another pause, this one even longer, stretching into an abyss of dawning horror in Xylos' mind. We fight it with our minds. Rostova continued, her voice heavy with a burden that Xylos could now, finally, begin to comprehend. The static is a force of perfect, ordered silence. It is the universe's natural tendency towards nothingness. But there is one force in the universe that is its perfect opposite. One force that is inherently chaotic, infinitely complex, and eternally resistant to simplicity. Consciousness. Our ancestors discovered the truth 1,000 years ago. The static is not just a physical phenomenon. It is a psychic one. It feeds on simple, ordered systems. It is drawn to the loud, brute-force technologies of civilizations like yours because they are predictable, they follow easily understood laws. But it recoils from the complexities of a sentient mind. The sheer, unpredictable, illogical chaos of thought, of emotion, of memory, it is anathema to the static. It is a poison to it. Xylos's liquid form trembled, a reaction he had not experienced since he was a larval being. The implications of her words were crashing down upon him, a tsunami of terrifying understanding. So when we say we fight, Rostova's voice concluded, the word now imbued with a meaning 1,000 times more terrible than mere warfare, we do not mean that we fire weapons, we mean that we think at it. We project the totality of our species, experience, our history, our art, our love, our rage, our chaos into the void. We build psychic breakwaters out of our own consciousness. We have worlds, high chancellor entire planets of trillions of minds that do nothing but remember and dream and feel and scream into the darkness, holding the silence at bay. We are not just watchmen. We are the dam, and the dam is made of souls. The channel closed, but the captain's final words echoed in the High Chancellor's mind. The weakest human ship had become the galaxy's strongest nightmare, not because of its technology, but because of the truth it carried. The humans were not just a species. They were a living weapon, their own minds the last line of defense against an enemy that consumed reality itself. Their calm was the discipline of soldiers on the front line of a war for existence. Their ethics were the desperate calculus of a species that knew the price of survival. Xylos looked out from his chamber at the stars, at the silent, beautiful void. But he no longer saw beauty. He saw a battlefield, and he saw the small, gray ship, the Wanderer, docked peacefully at his station. It was a lifeboat, yes, an offer of salvation, but it was also a reminder that the greatest strength in the universe was not in the fire of a sun or the power of a fleet, but in the quiet, desperate, and infinitely complex nightmare of a single thinking mind. The Cathar had sought to understand humanity's strength, and now they had their answer. And it was a truth far more terrifying and far more magnificent than they could have ever imagined. The real war was not for the stars, but for reality itself, and it was a war that was fought in the silence, with the ghosts of memory and the symphonies of thought. And humanity, the quiet children of a loud and violent world, were its eternal, weary, and unbreakable veterans.